During a job interview, you're asked to give your top 10 Excel formulas. Okay, so how would you respond? Remember, the key to a good interview is being specific, and your ability to quantify your skills is critical. The following list represents common Excel functions used in most businesses, and it's a really good way to get an interviewer's attention. Going one step further, if you can say you know how to do these functions, several things happen. First, you're detailing your Excel skills and not giving generic responses like, "I'm an intermediate user." Second, you're demonstrating competency and showing what's known as transferable skills. Third, the subtle implication is, since you can learn this set of Excel functions, you can learn others. All right, without further ado, here's the list. Tell them you know sum, average, if, VLOOKUP, index, match, SUMIF, offset, IFERROR, and trim. For the rest of this video, we'll walk you through how to use each of these functions, and you can download the sample file if you want to follow along. Last, before we get into things, please note that this list is in no way comprehensive. Feel free to explore and create your own top 10 list. Let's get started. If you think back to your old grade school days, the first calculation they taught you how to do was how to add numbers up, and that's where we'll start with Excel, good old-fashioned addition. Whenever you add numbers up, you use the sum function. In this lesson, we'll look at the various ways to do addition, and you can pick and choose the ones you like the best. In this example, we want to add up our expenses. We can do that by clicking on a blank cell, then type out equal, sum, open parentheses, and then we'll click and drag over the numbers that we want to add up, press our Enter key, and we're all done. Here's another way to do addition. If you look up here in the upper left-hand corner, there's this FX icon. This FX icon is referred to as the insert function icon. However, it's easier if you think about it as being the home of the functions. So to use this method, we could click on the FX icon, then do a search for our calculation, which is the sum. We'll see it from the list here, so we can just click on OK. And then with this prompt, all we have to do is simply give Excel the numbers. We can do that by doing a click and drag, press Enter, and now we've done the sum in a different way. A third way to do addition is to use the auto sum, which is located up here in the upper right-hand corner. To use the auto sum, simply click it, spot check your range. If that looks good, press your Enter key, and you're all done. A fourth way to do addition is to double-click on the auto sum. Just click where you want the formula to live, do a double-click on the auto sum, and you're all done. A fifth way to do addition is to use the keyboard shortcut Alt equal. So just click where you want the formula to be, Alt equal, press Enter, all done. We've been doing addition for a few moments, so let's take a break and introduce a new concept called the autofill. The autofill is very flexible and there's a lot you can do with it. In this case, we'll isolate ourselves and see how the autofill can benefit us when working with formulas. So if you study this example, you'll notice that we have to do addition over and over and over again. We can leverage the autofill and have it do the heavy lifting for us. Here's how it works. Let's use the auto sum to add these numbers up horizontally. Once that's completed, we'll click the cell that contains the formula. Then let our mouse rest on the lower right-hand corner of the active cell. The mouse will convert itself into a little black plus sign. With that black plus sign, simply click and drag down. And voila, Excel has duplicated our formulas. Just in case you haven't had enough, let's wrap up this lesson with even more ways of doing addition. Here's one you might like. You can select your cells ahead of time, and then when you're ready, click on your auto sum. Alternatively, you can select your cells ahead of time, then press Alt equal. But wait, there's more. Here's a cool gimmick you can do. If you hold your Control key down, you can select non-contiguous ranges. Once you're done selecting, click on your auto sum, and there you go. Okay, this is getting a little out of hand. How about we draw the line here and move on to something else? Okay, let's look at the average function. The average function will give you the middle or central point of a range of numbers. It's very easy to use, and we'll look at two ways of doing it. Here we have our total expenses, and we want to figure out the average of these numbers. Method one of doing this is to type equal, average, open parentheses, select our numbers, press Enter, and we're all done. Method two is to click the FX icon, do a search for the average if need be, find it, then click OK. And then all we have to do is just feed Excel the numbers, and we'll do that by way of click and drag. We'll click OK, and there we go. And that's about as complicated as it gets. Okay, let's take a look at everyone's favorite, the if function. So what exactly is the if function? Simply put, it's a question. and that question has two possible answers, yes or no. Depending on the answer to the question, dictates what happens. As a side note, sometimes people will define the if statement as being a logical test. If you ever hear the phrase logical test, it's just an elaborate way of saying you're going to ask a question. That's all. There's no need for unnecessary complexity. The if statement is nothing more than a question, and that question has two answers. Is it yes? Is it no? That's it. The key to reading an if statement is to recognize the pattern, and that pattern is always the same. It's always written, question comes first, what happens if it's yes, what happens if it's no, and a comma indicates a break in thought. By way of example, here we have a list of our employees, and we want to know if they passed a mandatory safety exam. If they want to pass the exam, they have to get a 70 or higher. Put another way, if their score is 70 or higher, they pass. If it's lower than 70, they fail. Let's build the if statement. We'll go up and click on the FX icon. We'll do a search for if. We'll then click OK. The first part is a logical test. Remember, a logical test is a question. So the question is, did the first person pass the exam? So we'll click on the exam score, type a greater than symbol, equal 70. Where it says value of true, that just means what happens if the answer is yes. In this case, they pass. Where it says value of false, that just means what happens if the answer is no. In this case, they fail. Go ahead and click OK. So far, so good. Let's drag our formula down. And it looks like we're good to go. Just for fun, let's change a couple scores just to see if it works. Let's wrap this up with a quick review. Remember, if statements always follow the same pattern. It's question comes first. What happens if it's yes? What happens if it's no? Moving on, let's talk about the if and if or condition. You may ask, why would you even use this in the first place? Well, simply put, you're going to ask more than one question. Furthermore, to make sense of everything, we have to first take a moment and study the and or condition. Let's start off with the and condition. Whenever you work with an and condition, you want to be aware that and conditions can be defined as I want everything or nothing at all. By contrast, or conditions give you more options. Now granted, that can be a little confusing, so let's see an example. Let's say yours truly hits the lottery and has enough money to buy a really expensive sports car. And that sports car has to have the following: a 5.2-liter V10 engine, fully loaded with every accessory we can think of, and it must be in black. So if you see what we're looking for, the car has to meet all those conditions. That is an and condition. It's everything or nothing at all. If we flip it around, let's say I go to the dealership and they say, well, we can give you everything you want, but the car is only available in gray, blue, yellow, or red. That's an or condition because I have more choices. Therefore, whenever you work with an and condition, they are restrictive. As we've been saying, it's everything or nothing at all. Or conditions, they open up. They give you more candidates, more choices, or more options. Let's see an example to clarify that. Here we have a list of our sales reps and their sales amounts for 2 quarters. And we want to know if they are eligible to get a bonus. To get a bonus, they must sell at least $10,000 in both quarters to qualify. So it's going to be an and condition. Why? Because they must sell at least $10,000 in quarter 1 and $10,000 in quarter 2 to get the bonus. Let's build a formula. We'll go up and click on the FX icon, do a search for the if statement. And now it's not too bad. What we can do is lead off by typing the word and, do an open parentheses, then click on our first quarter sales number, type a greater than symbol, followed by an equal sign, the number 10,000, do a comma, click on our second quarter sales numbers, greater than symbol, equal sign, $10,000, close that parentheses. Where it says value if true, we can type the word bonus because if they did meet the circumstances, they'll get the bonus. Where it says value if false, we'll type the word no bonus because they did not qualify for one. Next, we'll click OK. Copy our formula down, and check it out. Not too bad. Moving on, let's take a look at an if-or. Let's say this time around we become a little bit more lenient with our bonuses and decide to change the structure. In this case, they'll get a bonus no matter if they sold $15,000 in quarter 3 or $15,000 in quarter 4. As long as they sold $15,000, they get a bonus. To solve this, we can build an if-or. Let's cruise up and click on the FX icon, then do a search for the if statement if needed. Then, where it says logical test, we'll lead off by typing the word or, followed by an open parentheses, click the Q3 sales number, followed by a greater than symbol, equal, the number 15,000. We'll then type a comma, Click on the Q4 sales number, greater than symbol, followed by an equal sign, 15,000, and we'll close the parentheses. Where it says value of true, remember, as long as they have 1, they qualify. So we'll type the word bonus. Where it says value of false, we'll type no bonus. We'll click OK, drag our formula down. And there we go. Not too bad. Moving on, let's take some time to talk about everybody's favorite, the nested if. So what exactly is the nested if? Well, it's really a question within a question within a question within a question. You get the idea. Phrased a little differently, what will happen is you'll ask Excel a question, and then Excel will say, is it true? Is it true? Is it true? Is it true? A whole bunch of times, and eventually Excel will capitulate and say, well, it's got to be false. This will obviously be better understood by way of example, so let's take a look at one. Before we get into it, please recognize that Excel has made working with nested ifs a whole heck of a lot easier because they invented a brand new function that will do the heavy lifting for you. Put a different way, in the old days, we would have to write out nested if statements longhand, and frankly, that was a headache in a suitcase. No fun. In 2016, Excel gave us a brand new way to do this stuff, so let's bypass all that old school stuff and jump right into the new feature. In this example, we have our employees, the salary amount, and the tax withholding. And what we want to do is if the person gave a tax withholding of 1, take out 10% of the salary. If they gave a tax withholding of 2, take out 20% of the salary. And if they gave a tax withholding of 3, take out 30% of the salary. We can solve this using the ifs function or ifs function. Honestly, I really don't care how you pronounce it, since the important part is to know how it works. The coolest thing is it's really simple to use. It's practically fill in the blanks. Here we go. We'll go up and click on our FX icon, do a search for ifs. From here, all we have to do is ask the question and tell Excel what to do if the answer is yes. So, starting at the top, we'll ask, is this cell equal to 1? If it is, we'll take our salary times 10%. Then we'll ask, is this cell equal to 2? If it's equal to 2, we'll take the salary times 20%. Then we'll ask, is the cell equal to 3? If it's equal to 3, we'll take the salary times 30%. The only downside to this function is it does not provide an easy way to do a false or no condition. So the way we do that is we kind of have to trick it a little bit. The way we do that is for the final question, we'll type out the word true, and then we'll type out our false response. In this case, if the number is not 1, 2, or 3, what we want to see is the phrase not applicable. So we'll type the word true right here, then follow that with not applicable, click OK, and let's take it for a test drive. And it looks like all systems are go. And just to wrap things up, in case you're in the mood for some trivia, you can do up to 127 levels of questioning using the ifs. Yeah, have fun. And that'll do it. We'll see you in the next lesson. Okay, let's take a little bit of time and talk about everybody's favorite, the VLOOKUP. So what exactly is the VLOOKUP? Well, to better understand the VLOOKUP, why don't we take a moment and play a little game? Here's the way the game's going to be played. You got volunteered to buy lunch for the entire office. Lucky you. So since you got volunteered to pay for lunch, yours truly only wants to get a large sub. So if we take a quick moment to study our menu, here we have our subtypes on the far left-hand side, the prices for the small, medium, and large. And what I'm going to do is call out a subtype, and I would like you to please tell me how much a large sub is going to cost. So let's give it a go. If I would like a large turkey, how much is that going to be? $8.25. Very good. If I'm looking to get a large Italian, how much is that going to be? $8. Very good. If I like to get a large BLT, $8.25. Hopefully by now you understand the way the game is being played. And believe it or not, guess what you all did? You all just did a VLOOKUP. Look at that. Slid it right under the door and you weren't even aware you did one. So let's take a moment and break this down. The V in VLOOKUP stands for vertical. So the way the VLOOKUP works is you look at a chunk of cells and the information is displayed vertically. And then what you do is you start on the far left-hand side trying to find what you want. Once you find what you want, you then count over X number of columns to find the appropriate response. So let's go back to our sub example and take a look at things on a granular level. What happened when a subtype was called out? You subconsciously went to the far left-hand side to find the item. And then what you did is you counted over X number of columns to find the appropriate price. So phrased differently, what you did is you went to column 1 and then you counted over 2, 3, 4 to find the appropriate price. That's the way the VLOOKUP works. All that being said, a really good way to remember and conceptualize the VLOOKUP is the VLOOKUP is analogous to looking up a price on a menu item. So enough goofing around, let's take a look at a more practical example. Here we have a list of data, and you notice that it displays our product type, our inventory, our price, our vendor, and our region for a total of 5 columns. And what we want to do is when we type in a particular product type, we want to have the appropriate vendor returned. So we will obviously use the VLOOKUP to solve this. So we'll go up and click on our FX, do a search for the VLOOKUP. And now right here where it says lookup value, all that really means is what cell do you want to use? So we'll click on this cell right here. Where it says table array, that's just a fancy way of saying what chunk of cells do you want to use. So we'll select our chunk of cells over here. And then after we select our cells, what we have to do is lock them in place so they won't move. And we can do that by pressing our F4 key. You'll notice our dollar signs appear. So that tells us our cells are anchored in place. Where it says column index number, all that means is what column are we getting our response from? In this case, we want the vendor, which happens to live in the 4th column. So we'll type in the number 4. Last part is where it says range lookup. And what we'll do is type in the word false. When we type in the word false, all that means is Excel will only return a response if it finds an exact match in the column that we're looking in. Put another way, if we happen to type in a product type that is not on our list, Excel will get very angry at us and not give a response. And we'll demonstrate that here in a couple moments. For now, just click OK. Let's take it for a test drive to see if it works. If we got it right, when we type in our product type, the appropriate vendor should be returned. And it looks like it's working. Excellent. And right there is your VLOOKUP. Now, just to wrap things up, if we happen to type in a product that does not exist, what'll happen is Excel will get angry, as you can see here. Now, outside of demanding people type in data properly, which is most likely not going to happen, the best way to get rid of this ugly error message is to use something called the if error. Now, we have a separate module dedicated to how the if error works, so we recommend you check that one out. Else, that'll do it for the VLOOKUP, and we'll see you in the next one. Okay, let's take some time and look at the index and match functions. Now, please recognize the index and match functions standalone really don't do a whole heck of a lot. It's only when you integrate them with other functions does real magic happen. Yet, more often than not, you can make a very strong case that you will see the index and match being used together. So the common progression is you'll learn each function separately and then blend them together. Let's start off with the index function. The way the index function works is it will look at a chunk of cells, and then it will tell you what it finds at the intersection of a row and a column that you specify. Let's see an example. Here we have this table, and on the left side we have the income amount, and across the top we have the allowance amount. So what we want to know is if the person makes $50,000 and has an allowance of 2, how much should we take out? So let's use the index to figure this out. We'll go up and click on our FX icon, type out index, and then we'll just click OK when we get this prompt. From here, we just have to fill in the blanks. The array is just our chunk of cells, so we'll start off by selecting the array, and then it's just a matter of counting out our rows and columns to tell Excel where to look. In this case, we want $50,000. So the $50,000 income happens to live in the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5th row. So we'll type in 5. And then we want an allowance of 2, and that happens to live in the 1, 2, 3, 3rd column. From here, we're done. Just click OK, and let's test it. $50,000 is here, allowance of 2 is here, and it looks like we're in good shape. And that's pretty much it for the index. Now granted, nothing too riveting, and standalone, the index doesn't do a whole heck of a lot. Remember, the index is often integrated with other functions. For now, let's move on to the match function. The match function will tell you what row or column a particular item lives in. Put another way, all the match function is going to do is tell you what position the item you're looking for is in. Yeah, that sounds pretty confusing. Let's see an example to clarify it. Let's start off by looking at this allowance row in our table. What we want to know is if the person entered a 0, 1, 2, or 3, what position is it in? And the match will help us figure that out. Now, honestly, the match is easier if you type it out, so let's go ahead and go for it. In this case, we're looking for an allowance of 3, so we'll type out equal match, open parentheses. The lookup value in this case is going to be this cell right here. We'll type a comma, we'll highlight the allowance row, then type a comma. And now here's where people get tripped up. This whole less than, exact match, greater than nonsense. What exactly is going on here? In real life, you'll wind up using 2 of these 3, and they are less than and exact match. The exact match is just that. It's literal. It's going to look for an exact match only. Think of less than as being, I want to find the closest value without going over. And we'll see an example of that here in a couple seconds. For right now, we want to use an exact match because our choices are only 0, 1, 2, and 3. So to finish this formula, we'll type a 0, and there we go. And Excel is telling us that the allowance of 3 happens to live in the 4th position, which is correct. Now, let's see another example of a match, and this one's going to have a slight twist, yet nothing too difficult. Let's say the person makes $65,000 a year, and we want to know where $65K lives in the list. So in this example, there is no $65,000, so we have to find the closest approximate match. Let's go ahead and type the formula. We'll type out equal match, open parentheses, click the income value of $65,000, type a comma, then select our income amounts, type a comma, and in this case, we don't want an exact match. What we want to do is type the number 1, which will let us find the closest value without going over. So we'll type the number 1, close our parentheses, press enter, and it looks like it's working. Just for fun, let's put in a whole bunch of different income amounts just to see what Excel says. And it looks like our formula is cooperating. And that does it for the match function. Again, standalone, the match function does not do a whole heck of a lot. In the next section, we will combine the index and the match function, which will allow us to do more sophisticated lookups. So far, we've looked at the index function and the match function. Ultimately, what we can do is combine the index and match together and have it be a one-stop shop for doing sophisticated lookups. Building off our previous example, what we want to have happen is when a person puts in the income and the allowance, we want to have the amount automatically returned. So we'll start by clicking on the FX. We'll then type the index, and the array is going to be this chunk of cells. Now for the row, here is where we can integrate the match function. Let's type match, open parentheses, click on the cell with the salary, type a comma, select the salary range, type a comma, and we'll type a 1 because we want an approximate match, close the parentheses. Then we'll jump down to where it says column, and we'll type match, open parentheses, select our allowance amount, type a comma, select the range up top, type a comma, and type a 0 because we want an exact match, close the parentheses, and let's take it for a test drive. Not too bad. We have achieved our objective. So let's wrap up this segment by looking at a more practical example. Here we have a list of our employees, their salary amounts, and the amount they want withheld, and we want to know what amount should be withheld based off the combination of their salary and the withholding amount. So over here we have our table of data, and to pull this off, we have to do a combination of the index and match. By now, you know the drill. We'll click the FX and pull up the index. And then for the array, we want this chunk of cells, so we'll select it. In this case, we want the cells to be locked in place, so we'll press the F4 key. Next, for the row, we'll type match, open parentheses, click on the salary, we'll type a comma, we'll then select this range right here, and then press F4 to lock that in. In this case, we want the closest match, so we'll type a 1, close parentheses, then we'll jump down to where it says column, type match, open parentheses, click the withholding, type a comma. We'll then select these cells over here and press F4 to lock them in. In this case, we want an exact match, so we'll type a 0, close parentheses, click OK, drag the formula down, and check it out. We are all set. Okay, let's take some time and look at the SUMIF. What exactly is the SUMIF? Well, simply put, think of the SUMIF as being circumstantial addition. You want to add up a couple things if they meet a particular set of conditions. And that's about as complicated as it gets. By way of example, here we have some regions, some products, and some sales amounts. And let's say we want to add up all the sales from the South region. We can use the SUMIF to figure that out. Let's go up here and click on the FX icon, do a search for SUMIF, and make sure to choose SUMIF, not SUMIFs. And from here, we can just fill in the blanks. Our range, in this case, is going to be the list of the regions, so we'll select those. We are looking for the South, so we'll click a cell that contains the text South. And the last part is the sum range, which is just our numbers. Let's select these numbers, click OK, and there you go. Now, let's see another example of the SUMIF. In this case, let's say we want to add up all of our sales that are over $7,500. Let's fire up our SUMIF. And now where it says the range, in this case, we can just select our numbers. And where it says criteria, we can type out greater than, equal, $7,500. Once we click OK, there's our answer. Moving on, now that we know the SUMIF, just recognize the main limitation it has is it's essentially a one-trick pony. It can only get you one set of criteria. If you want to get multiple set of conditions or multiple criteria, you have to use the SUMIFs. Let's take a look at that. So in this case, we want the total sales from all the leashes that were sold in the South. So by now, you know the drill. We'll go up and click where it says FX. We'll do a search for SUMIFs. And then here it's a little backwards, but it's not too bad. We'll start off with the sum range. So we will select our numbers here. Then where it says criteria range, we'll highlight our regions. And within that region, we're looking for South. So we'll click that. And then for criteria range 2, we'll select our products. And then here we want to find all the leashes. So we'll click a cell that contains leash, click OK. And right there is the total sales of all the leashes from the South. And there's your SUMIFs. One public service announcement just in the event you ever do any type of count ifs, sum ifs, average ifs, or whatever. If you ever intend to sort your list, it's a very good idea to type out what you're looking for as opposed to clicking on the cell like we did in these examples. The reason for that is when you sort your list, it's going to screw up the formula's results. So put another way, if I was going to be doing this in real life and knew I was going to sort the list at some point, what I would do is type out what I'm looking for. For example, I would have typed out South as opposed to clicking on the cell that contains South because I did not want to screw up my formulas if I did a sort. Again, the choice is yours. Just recognize the environment that you're playing with whenever you do these types of things. It's really circumstantial as to you doing a sort or not in real life. Hopefully it made some sense to you, and we'll see you in the next lesson. Okay, let's take a look at the offset. What exactly is the offset? Well, from the get-go, just realize the offset function is kind of the oddball of the Excel functions. Admittedly, it's kind of goofy, it's kind of awkward, but it does serve a purpose. Before we see the function in action, let's take a moment to describe the way it works. So imagine yourself looking through a pair of binoculars, and you're looking at a particular point. Then what you do is you move down, then you move across, and then you start to play with the zoom, making the image larger or smaller. That's analogous to the way the offset function works. With the offset, you have a beginning point, then you move down X number of rows, then you move across X number of columns. From there, you tell Excel to grab a chunk of cells because you want to do something with it. Before we go any further, let's take a moment to recognize that the offset function is typically used with dynamic ranges. And I made the conscious decision to throw practicality out the window and simply focus on how exactly the offset function works. Let's start with a super simple example just for the sake of clarity, and then we'll move into more practical examples. So here we have our data with our product categories going down the left-hand side, our regions going across the top, and what we want to do is extract some of those numbers so we can work with them. In this case, we want to see how much dog food was sold in the South. Let's use the offset function to extract just that number. Let's go up and click the FX icon, do a search for offset, and now where it says reference, reference means starting point. So in this case, we want Excel to start right here. Now Excel's going to get a little angry. That's okay, we'll just ignore that. The next thing is to tell Excel how many rows to count down. In this case, we're looking for dog food, so we'll move down 1, 2, 3 rows, and then type the number 3. The next thing Excel wants to know is how many columns to count over. In this case, we are looking for the South, so we'll count over 1, 2, 3 columns. We'll type the number 3, We'll just ignore height and width for right now. We'll see that in the next example. Simply click OK, and we should get $28,000. And there we go. Again, a very impractical example. The goal here is just to get you warmed up as to how the offset function works. Okay, let's see a more practical example. The way the offset function really works is you give Excel a starting point. It will then move down X number of rows, then across X number of columns, and that gives Excel a new point. From there, you tell Excel how many cells to grab or to extract. And this is done by using the height and width portion of the function dialog box. If you go back to that binocular analogy we gave you at the beginning of the lesson, the zoom portion of making your area larger or smaller is how the height and width portion of the function dialog box works. Let's see an example to clarify it. In this case, the boss wants to see the numbers for the dog food and the dog treats from the south and the west. And since the boss wants to see them, we have to extract them. Let's click the FX icon, and then for the reference, we'll give it this starting point right here. For the rows, we'll count down 3 because the dog food lives here. Then for the columns, we'll count over 1, 2, 3 because the south lives here. That gives us a new starting point. For the height and width, here's how much we tell Excel to grab. If we type in a number of 2, that will tell Excel to grow 2 rows. If we type in a width of 2, that will tell Excel to grow 2 columns. Put another way, when we type in those values, Excel will grab this chunk of cells right here. When we click OK, Excel will extract out those chunk of cells and show them to us. And right there is the chunk of cells we are looking for. That is the dog food and the dog treats from the south and the west. All right, so by now you have a better understanding of how the offset function works in its entirety, yet still wondering why would you even do this in the first place? Well, please understand that the offset function is best utilized when it is nested with other functions. Let's see an example to clarify that. So for this final example, let's say that for whatever reason, the boss saw an offset function video somewhere, has become enamored with it, and wants you to take the average of the dog food and the dog treats from the south and the west. Lucky us. So just to make this easier, we'll go up here and copy our existing offset formula. We'll then jump down here and type equal average, open parentheses, copy in the offset formula, close parentheses, and there we go. All right, so let's wrap this lesson up. As we've learned, the offset function is kind of clunky and kind of awkward. And as we stated, the goal here was simply to illustrate the way the offset function works. Hopefully this has helped you out, and we'll see you in the next one. Okay, let's take a look at the IFERROR. What exactly is the IFERROR function? Well, the way it works is if at some point in your spreadsheet you have an error message, and by error message, we mean something like pound name, pound value, pound reference, pound div 0, pound sand, whatever Excel is getting upset about, you can use the IFERROR to replace that ugly error message with some text of your choosing. It's very simple, very easy, and very direct. The way the IFERROR works is like this. Your function literally reads equal IFERROR, function goes here, comma, error message in quotes. Let's see an example to clarify. Here we have our obvious error message, and if we want to fix this and make it easier on our eyes, we can go up here into the formula bar and click between the equal and the first letter of our formula, and then type IFERROR, open parentheses, do not touch the formula, click on the far right-hand side, type a comma, open quote, type our error message, close quote, close paren, and right there is your IFERROR. Now, just to wrap things up, please recognize the IFERROR is very blunt. The intent behind the IFERROR is to use it whenever you have any type of error message on your spreadsheet. Some people like it, some people don't. Personally, for what it's worth, I like it because it makes my life easier and it's very simple to use. That said, there's your IFERROR. Feel free to use it as you wish, and we'll see you in the next one. Let's take some time and look at the trim function. What exactly is the trim function? Well, this one might be a career saver for some folks. What the trim function will do is it will look at your cell, and then it will remove any leading, additional, and end spaces. Here's an example. It looks like we have imported some comments from our web forms, and once again, true to form, people fail to use the spacebar properly. Imagine that. Let's use the trim function to reduce our aggravation. Here we go. We'll type out equal trim, open parentheses, click on the cell with the offending text, press enter, and look at that. Let's drag everything down, and there we go. That's about as complicated as it gets. We will see you in the next lesson.